Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful
Excellent.
Sunday.
It is indeed. And Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What is going on? Real quick anecdote before we start. So today's episode is going to be all about the Dungeons and Dragons
Honor
Among Thieves movie. As we do with our typical spoiler cast, we'll do kind of our spoiler-free thoughts and then spoiler-filled. But first, I wanted to share, I grabbed like a lunch with my family today. We were like catching up on a lot of birthdays and like my sister's birthday is next weekend. So it was like kind of an early birthday for her. And talking to my sister and brother-in-law, they indicated that they were they're one of those people that like watched The Last of Us on HBO, really loved it, and then picked up the game and played through the first part one, and have they are still early on in part two, but they've made it through some like key moments of part two, and so it's just fascinating that like they'd never played it before, but they got like sucked in and are very interested to see how that story is going to play out, and then also how they're going to adapt it in the future. So that was a cool little like, oh, awesome that HBO actually is bringing in a new audience to that game. So yeah, shout out to that. But yes, as I said, today's going to be all about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. If you like the show, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. So yes, spoiler-free thoughts first, as we often do. It's going to be interesting because Cameron is kind of our D&D like expert, I will say. He's actually played it and whatnot. I've gotten into watching a lot of the actual play content in the last couple of years, Critical Role, Dimension 20 in particular. And then Logan has like zero Dungeons and Dragons context apart from like the way that it is kind of seeped into general RPG video game stuff over the years. So Logan, I want to throw it to you first then. You just saw it this morning. Cameron, I saw it a couple nights ago. What were your spoiler-free thoughts of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves?
Yeah, I forgot that I had a subtitle first off, and one that is totally unnecessary. But
it's I think to distinguish it from the very much maligned movie from 2000.
Yeah, I had to bring it to you. It is very much needed because people need to know this is not a remake of the last one. Oh man, that last one is bad, so bad. So yeah, it was needed.
But it's a ton of fun, right? I mean, I put it in the Slack chat. The movie is just a blast, right? I mean, it is one of my favorite types of movies, which is a great like. It is on TBS on a Sunday morning kind of film, and I think Dungeons & Dragons absolutely fits into that mold. It's super fun. I think that Chris Pine in the competition to be the best Chris. That him and Chris Evans are kind of duking out head and head every year. He put a strong show in here. I love his chemistry with Michelle Rodriguez, who I think is great here and who actually kind of gets to have a bit more personality than her usual outings, where she just usually is just, I am the big tough woman, which she's kind of largely been assigned to in stuff like Fast and Furious. But really the whole supporting cast, I think, is great, right? Particular praise has to be given to Hugh Grant, who I love has sort of developed into this like just deliciously smarmy, like just kind of dickish villain in the last couple of years, because that's exactly who Hugh Grant should be. He's so perfect at that. Even when he was like leading rom-coms in the late 90s, early 2000s, he was sort of an asshole. So just sort of is natural that this is what his destination would be when he gets into his 50s. I think he steals a lot of scenes. I think the movie's really silly. And, I think, I don't know, like, it is a film that sort of ticks off all the buckets of what a, like, fun, popcorny movie should be, right? Like, you're going to laugh a lot. You're going to smile. You're going to kind of cheer. You're going to cry, right? Like, it sort of does, I think, all the buckets really well. We'll get into its spoiler stuff in a moment, but I think the payoff for like its ending is actually like really clever, I think, in terms of how it's like threaded throughout the film. and pays off really nicely. And so, yeah, I had a ton of fun with it. I think it is a strong contender for certainly my top 10 favorite movies of the year by the end of the year, but maybe even a little bit higher. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, like what movies have really come out this year, and so far this year it's been pretty light on especially like popcorn action kind of things. I said to Cameron, I think on our drive home, I was like, this is like the epitome of that movie that we often talk about with Logan, of like, they don't make movies like this anymore. This is very much like that, mid-level fun action romp movie that's not.
You remember 2005? We do, right?
Yeah,
that kind of vibe. Yeah,
yeah. It is. It has those national treasure flavors and stuff like that. It's not,
it's great.
It's not trying to be this big world changing event, but like there's so much love and care put into it, and I think it really cleverly, in a way that like even if you aren't a D&D fan, like there's still a lot to like hang your hat on there and still enough to enjoy. And the game or the movie explains away enough of what you need to know to really make it work. And then if you are a fan of D&D, or the game, mechanical things and stuff like that, or the monsters and the spells, there's just like a whole bunch of extra like Easter eggs for you to like gorge yourself on, which is where I kind of fell on it. Is like I enjoyed, like the movie is, it's not a spoiler to say the movie takes place in the Forgotten Realms, like setting of Dungeons and Dragons, which is where like Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate are, which even if you're like, not versed, you've probably heard those names because there are games based on them and whatnot. And that's how like that area has kind of like breached into like a broader pop culture stuff. But even seeing like, the mimics in this thing are common enough in video games that you've probably seen a treasure chest that turns out to not be a treasure chest,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
You've seen that in Bloodborne, right?
And constant, like, I mean, they're in a lot of the Final Fantasies and stuff like that. I remember very like at a much younger age playing Dark Cloud, and my like for the first time, and my mom asking me how I was enjoying it in like the first little opening section of the game. And I remember specifically saying, like, even though I don't like them because they pop out and scare the crap out of me, but I remember telling her, like, it has mimics, I like it. Like that was like a reason I was really enjoying Dark Cloud back on the PS2. So like there are plenty of things in this for you to enjoy, even if you don't know all that stuff. But yeah, if you do, there is a fun joy in like the party makeup of Chris Pine as the Bard, and Michelle Rodriguez as the Barbarian, Hugh Grant as like the cunning villainous rogue, your sorcerer character, your druid character, your paladin, Reggie John Page.
We'll get to the paladin.
Reggie John Page, I think is a very fun, like he's not nearly in as much of the movies I would like, and I imagine if they get a sequel, they're gonna fold him in a lot more to the party and to the movie, because of how I think successful he is in his role in this one. But like when he is on screen, he's stealing the screen, and is a ton of fun in that regard. And then there's just like there was a ton of stuff of just like, oh, that's a cool, clever little thing. I've enjoyed like reading and like looking up Easter eggy kind of things about the movie after the fact. And it's very clear. I mean, like one of the directors, John Francis Daley, was on Freaks and Geeks back in his youth. He was kind of the main kid on Freaks and Geeks, and has gone on into directing. And so it's just a cool, like he clearly has a love for the source material. You helped also write the script, of course. And everybody was just like, it was very much a movie of everybody that's in this movie knows the kind of movie they're in and is just having a blast with it, having a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyed a lot of that. I think there are a couple characters that get like less to do, as you often have in these big ensemble things. But even the ones that have like less to do in terms of like bigger fun story arcs still get like cool moments or cool sequences, or maybe they get a fun action element. I had a lot of fun with that indeed. So Cam, hit me with your spoiler-free thoughts before we dive into full spoiler territory.
So as somebody who like got into Dungeons and Dragons in my teen years, a game that was actually banned by my extremely religious family. It was a secret that I was like, I'm going over to a friend's for game night, like once every couple months, and just was like an absolute blast to play. I really didn't get deep into it until I was in college. And it was something that I will never forget. This first campaign, like the first long-term campaign I was in, watching this movie felt like watching a campaign come to life. Everything from like, you could tell there were moments where it's like, oh, that right there, that's a nat one. That is straight up a nat one moment. Like a natural one. So for people who are unfamiliar, this is definitely for the folks like Logan might be a part of this as well. Nat 20 is a success plus, like, so it's a success, and depending on like the situation, it could be like, you definitely got it, no problem, here's a bunch of information, or it could be this would have been so bad, there's no way you could have accomplished this, but you rolled that nat 20, and it's this tremendous moment of triumph that would have been otherwise impossible. And then a nat 1 is literally you
beefed it as much as you could beef it.
Yes, you have fallen flat on your face as badly as possible. Rolling a nat 1 can mean death. It can mean dismemberment. It can mean that your entire like plan that you've been like role playing for the past like half an hour to an hour has just completely fallen apart. And it can be something as like devastating, or it can be something so personally just like, oh. And it's just such a, like, this movie captures those moments perfectly in so many different ways. And it's just fantastic. Just every level, top to bottom of this film is ingratiated within the world of Dungeons and Dragons. It plays by its own rules and adds a few more extra on top of them. It feels like a really well-run game of D&D brought to life, and just such a majestic and wonderful way. They, like you guys have said, they know what kind of movie they're in, and they are all there for it. And I just think it's been incredible to see a group of people who just execute on a film that should have worked much earlier in filmmaking, but for some reason has been elusive in finding a good way of expressing the game itself, and not just a fantasy story. There are plenty of fantasy books and stories that started off as D&D campaigns. But this is the first time I've ever seen a film show not something that started off as a D&D campaign, but is a D&D campaign proper. And it felt wonderful and excellent, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think just kind of bouncing off that, I think it's a prime time for this kind of stuff to come out as well, because you also have like the Legend of Vox Machina that has had extreme success because of the Critical Role tie-in and like obviously the increase of being able to see and like watch people play Dungeons and Dragons and stuff in the Twitch era. I think both this movie and Legend of Vox Machina do a good job of like kind of poking fun at the conventions of D&D and stuff like that, and some of the rules. Like there's a great line in Legend of Vox Machina season 1 when somebody's like, they cast a spell and they're like, yeah, I can only do that once a day for some reason, because that is like the rule of that spell, once per long rest or something. And there are a few of those in this movie that maybe we'll talk about in the spoiler territory. That
I'm sure we will. There's one in particular.
Are fun. That the movie is like, it's not punching down at those ideas. It is embracing them and like showing them, love and for the silliness that they are. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that. Unless anybody has anything else, I think we can probably dive into full spoiler talk.
Before we do, I'll let people know, if you haven't seen it yet and you see it and you're like, hey, wait a minute, that's not like part of the rules, or that's not in like the player's handbook. Remember, a D&D campaign being run by a DM, they can homebrew stuff. Is there just a smidgen of homebrew stuff like sprinkled in here? Yes, and that's why it's great.
Right. I also just wanted to say, on a broader point, I love how much we've accepted and brought into the vernacular. They know what kind of movie they're in. It is maybe that Bond show's proudest legacy is just us using this all the time now. It makes me very happy.
Excellent. This will be kind of our chopping off point for spoiler-free stuff. We'll dive into full spoilers from here on.
We all recommend you should go watch it.
Yeah,
we all would definitely recommend it.
Regardless of your interest in the subject of Dungeons and Dragons, it is just a fun romp that hits on every level. Take your kids to go see it. It's awesome.
Yeah, indeed. Good fun times. So diving in, full spoiler stuff. Cam, I think I want to start with you on this.
Sure.
Were there any like crazy, like obviously spoilers is going to be not only like the plot elements and stuff like that, but also like
D&D
the big like
shit,
fun
yeah.
Easter eggs or stuff like that. Was there anything on that side of thing that you were like, I can't believe they included that in this movie?
All the spells are legitimate spells from the game. That blew me away. There's and none of them are just fireball. It was so great seeing such a variety of things. The homebrew stuff I was mentioning before obviously is like, there's a couple of things, but the biggest one, of course, is owlbear. The owlbear transformation by druids is not possible at that, like, I think on any level. I think it's just not a part of the druids animal options, unless it's like homebrewed in with a specific like subclass.
It is, and so one of the things I'll jump in on just right off of that is that D&D Beyond, which is basically the like digital, like you can create your characters and stuff like that for your digital games or your in-person games. They did create stat blocks for each of kind of the main cast of characters, and in the one for Doric, the druid here, they did basically identify that like she can wild shape into animals 5 times per day, and they are a challenge rating 3 or lower, or owlbear. Like so they did like make that as a special thing that she can do for that character, because it is typically not a a level of character that you could wild shape into. But even that, like, just on the owlbear in particular, I'll jump in off of that. Of the first actual plaything I ever watched was Dimension 20's Fantasy High, which is basically the pitch is a Dungeons and Dragons, but in the world of a John Hughes 80s town, high school,
It's so good.
Adventure kind of thing.
It's so good.
And the high school the Adventuring Academy, the high school that they go to, the mascot is the owlbears, Hoot Growl.
Hoot Growl.
And so, like, when I saw an owlbear in the first trailers that came out for this, I was like, it's hilarious that like I can see that and immediately just think Hoot Growl because of Dimension 20. So yeah, even that's like a fun little thing.
That's their cheer, by the way. Their cheer when they're rooting on the owlbears is hoot growl, hoot growl, hoot growl.
Because it's a hoot for an owl and growl for a bear. Yeah. There, I think we've fully explained that joke, Cameron. How about you, Logan? Were there any spoilery things, even if you're not a fan, you don't know what the spells were and stuff like that? Was there anything that jumped out at you as like, oh, that was a really cool, element or sequence or anything like that?
I think the paladin stuff, actually, right? So I really like the fact that he isn't in the movie this much, right? Because I think, I was sort of explaining it a little bit to Shab, right? Like paladins, like they're the Luke Skywalker, they're the annoying good guys, right? And like that is sort of like pop culture, like I think reputation they've gotten for, right? They're the lawful good, right?
He is lawful good, yeah,
right, exactly. And so I think
and he's also oath of devotion.
Right, and so I think that element of like everyone just being like, yeah, like he's Superman, but really annoying, and them having fun with that element, right? And them having like, yeah, like he would sort of be like, game breaking, movie breaking, campaign breaking if you had him the entire time because of how like great he is at everything. So I think it was smart to just have him kind of pop in the middle, help them out, and then just like leave and let them do their own rest of the campaign, right? And I think I loved him as just like this one-off character that you meet on like a random side quest, right? And then just pick him up and that's all you get him for, right? That feels very video game. That feels very D&D.
It's there's a great poll I'll put. Sorry, go ahead, Logan. You can finish your thoughts.
I was just gonna say, like, I think, yeah, like, and I think, like Trevor said, like that actor who I know really only from Bridgerton is so utterly charming too that I love that they sort of went in a like subversion of that, really, right? And that kind of made him this like straight laced, like goody two shoes kind of Clark Kent guy. But I loved everything they did with the paladin aspect of that, and how lawfully good he is, and how much you have like that kind of I think annoying, you're too talented at everything paladin they made him, I think is like perfect. And so that would probably be the thing that I like jumped out to me the most in terms of like that's a really good bit.
I'll ask you just real quick, because you may not be familiar with this term, Logan. Do you know what the term DMPC is?
Oh God, DMPC. Is DM like Dungeon Master, something like that? Okay, PC, that I can't piece of that one
So
together.
PC is
Paladin class?
no playable character. Not a bad guess though.
I was
Paladin
pretty close
class is
there.
a
Okay,
good
yeah.
guess. No, so DM PCs are essentially DM devices, like Dungeon Master devices, to introduce lore or narrative or like be a guide. And they're usually strong enough so if something bad is happening to one of the players, say for example, you're going to some place that is extremely dangerous and way too over-leveled for your characters,
Right.
but the story says they need to go there. You introduce a DMPC who has a strange tie-in to the item they're looking for, and is loosely contextually like related to the main bad guy, but is not a mainstay party member and is only there to help them through this very big trial that they're dealing with.
Right.
That is this guy. That is this character. He is very much a DMPC to the point when he pulls out the Harper book, by the way, which is like an amazing thing that he does. He just has this Harper book that is weirdly and surprisingly, despite it being a Harper's like handbook of membership, has like the photos and like the diorama built into it of this narrative and plot like the narrative of this overarching plot of the world's lore and narrative and how it ties into what they're dealing with. He very much is that, and he's the best example of a DMPC. And because one, he's played straight, like he's an oath of devotion, lawful good paladin. He makes them swear that they are not in it for their personal gain. Like everything he's doing is done to create essentially a narrative framework to set up the players later when they have a ship full of gold, they are out of danger, and they should be totally fine. But they leave the city that they've made an oath to make sure we deliver this gold to behind them. And it's this brilliant moment that lets Chris Pine's character like just shine through as like a plan maker. And also just in like the most ingenious way. I never would have thought about it in a million years that the balloon that's being ignited and lifted up at the like that's shown at the beginning of the film and then in the middle of the film is the like device they use which to deliver the gold out. Like it's such real, like just absolutely such brilliantly done thing.
Gag. Yeah.
Yep. Just absolutely, and it's coming out of his mouth too.
Yeah.
Like he promised also everybody would get something. And so it's just, it's done so incredibly well. I'm absolutely like, so that DMPC being put in and executed as flawlessly as it was, I was like, holy crap. People were like, that's my favorite character. I'm like, that wasn't even one of the PCs. That was a DMPC. Yeah. It's so good.
To that and kind of to your vibe of like it feels like a real campaign. I love that there are so many ideas like that in the game of like that's such a clever way of like finding a solution for this problem. And much like a real campaign, there are really clever things that immediately fall apart. Like the whole like all of the work they put into creating the portal to get them into the vault, and then the picture falls over and so they have to like, plan D or whatever is like just trying to chisel, a little bit of a hole in the ground there that they can get through. But like,
that's a luck check. Like that's a luck check going bad for them. That's for sure.
That's like a nat 1 on something. So yeah, I think there are so many like fun little moments like that and just kind of like creative elements. One of the first sequences I want to give a shout out to, that I really enjoyed was just from a creative visual storytelling perspective was the druid kind of like chase through the city where she starts out as like the dragonfly and gets like identified. The wizard has a crazy passive perception or something and knows that there is a druid there. And then like the chase that ensues that's kind of all structured and framed as like a one-shot kind of thing with her turning into a mouse and then a cat and all these different like animals to try and escape, culminating in the deer, which obviously had been a setup for a joke earlier in the film, and then gets paid off immediately after. It was just such a fun, like cool way to like, we'd already been introduced to that character as a horse turning into an owlbear kind of thing. And so we get like this introduction of this character who can turn into these cool animals. And that was just like, I think Doric is one of the ones that like story wise and like character wise doesn't get like a ton to do in the movie, but she gets like these really cool sequences for her character that are like elements of the movie that I will remember, even if I forget the character's name. I'll be like, the druid had these really cool, like, like shape shifting through town sequence. That was a lot of fun.
And I guarantee you there are campaigns out there where, as harrowing as that felt, rolling the dice for those moments must have felt even more so. Like letting your fate be handled by a 20-sided like piece of plastic is like bone chilling at times. And so seeing like these close, like just barely getting out of their moments, it's like she's barely making her checks as she's getting through. Deception check failed. Like all this stuff going through and like having to like just pivot and make quick decisions. And it's like, that's exactly like, that is 100% from a campaign. Like I feel it in my bones. It's so good. How did I fail? I'm a fly. Like I rolled in like a 16 on my stealth. It's like, oh, she's got to pass this perception of 18 because this is a broken character that we're fighting. So good. So good.
Sorry, I'm looking to see.
Are you looking to see what her passive perception is?
Her passive perception was only a 12. Sofina's the red wizard. So she probably just rolled a nat 20.
Rolled a nat 20, or just like if her passive perception is a 12, what is her? Like,
or maybe she had detect magic up or something like that.
Oh, she probably could have, but also she could have also just like rolled a high perception check.
Anyway, just fun speculation about like what was the D&D-ness behind these character moments in the movie. Is like it's a fun, stupid thing that we can have debates on. Similarly, I think another one, like one of those places that kind of like plays with the idea of that and the nature of that is when they're in the Underdark and those like brain creatures roll by and they're like, they will attack anybody with a high intelligence, so be wary, and then they just kind of walk by. I love that's insulting.
What's great about it is like none of the character classes that they're playing are high intelligence character classes.
Mm-hmm.
They're all charisma or like physical, like dex or strength based, and so like. That's so great. That's such a great nod. Be like, yeah, we know we don't have like a quote unquote smart character here.
Yeah.
Because Chris Pine isn't rolling intelligence; he's rolling charisma for sure.
Yes, Simon and Doric were the highest with a 16 intelligence,
which is pretty dang good
compared to Sofina, the bad wizard, who had like 20.
Yeah.
Like fun things like that, or the one that I had seen part of in like a clip that they released before the movie, the Speak with Dead sequence.
Oh, so good.
Where they set up this silly idea of like, all right, you can ask them 5 questions and then they're dead forever.
I saw the same,
so I had seen that the first sequence of that.
Right, like, I didn't know it was going to be an extended sequence.
Exactly.
So, right,
yeah, and that was like fun, and I was like, okay, now it's going to be a little bit lessened in the movie, but then the fact, like, I think they released it knowing that they had some gold to kind of follow it up with, including, the one who just died in, stepping out of the bathtub instead of like didn't even make it to the battle, just died getting out of the bathtub, cracked his head open.
Yeah, aren't you Sven? No, I'm Ven. Sven's my brother. And they're like, oh.
So
just like also like the idea that like, because even the like 5 questions thing, like mix up of the yeses is not even the funniest moments of it. And also like not even the most important. One of the best moments is the guy who's like, and I took it from the battle and I fell and I was dying. But as I met this paladin and he like, and it's like, but even though I shouldn't have believed him, I did. And it's like so dumb, but it's the perfect intro to like this paladin. Also like, and also shout out to okay, everybody make a lore check or a history check. Okay, you passed. Chris Pine's the only person who didn't pass it. Great. You've all heard of this guy, and this is how you know about it. This is how you know about it, and this is how you know about it. And it's like, it's the perfect setup for, one, a DNPC, but also a perfect setup for just like anything of like, one person doesn't know what it is. Well, he failed his history check. He was a Harper and he was in prison. Like, he hasn't been hearing it. Like, he's not concerned about what's going on with paladins.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's great. So oh God, it's so good.
That whole sequence is so great.
Logan, I'll throw it to you. What did you think of the Bradley Cooper cameo?
Unexpected. I really didn't expect to see Bradley Cooper in this movie.
Nobody did.
It is such a, like, that's the thing. This movie has these moments of like, I think, emotional maturity and like actual like heart to it that I think helps make it stand out from a lot of the 90s and early 2000s ilk that it's sort of drawn from, right? Because like you said, Trevor, it is sort of in that similar vein of film, and I think what makes it a little bit better is that it does have this kind of emotional side to it as well. And I think that's actually like a very funny but also like really sweet moment between those two characters, right? And then just kind of each wishing for the best for the other. And then her coming out and like her and Chris Pine's moment together of kind of silence, and then like singing the song and obviously planting the seed for that to come back later on. And right, like I liked it because I think it sets up so much of the heart of the film, which is Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez's like father and mother relationship for, you know, the daughter, right? And I love the fact that they sort of like flirt with the idea of like them being maybe a thing, but ultimately like they don't go that direction as like the kind of epilogue shows with her having a new very small guy she's into. But like it still establishes them very much as two people who like really love and care for one another and have like this like surrogate parental relationship with this child. And I think it's that moment helped kind of solidify that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, indeed. I in like reading a review of the movie beforehand, I had seen something to the effect of like, oh, and Michelle Rodriguez's ex is like a fun cameo, but that was like all I knew. I didn't know who it was, and so like in my mind, I'm like, all right, they brought in like Vin Diesel or something for it, and it's it's just a dumb little thing to because that's the only thing you might associate Michelle Rodriguez with. So it ended up being Bradley Cooper as this little halfling guy. It's just like, all right.
So good.
That I guess that works too. Like one of the last people I would have expected to see in this movie, and a fun little surprise. And yeah, he's just such a nice little like good-hearted guy who wants the best for her, but clearly like they just were on different paths. Yeah. And so yeah, I like that, he shows up for his one little scene. We find out like throughout over the course of the movie, they both clearly have a type.
Mm-hmm.
He's very much like interested in large barbarian women, and she's very much interested in little halfling guys. You
love to see it.
And yeah, it's just a
short
fun,
kings,
like fun little surprise in the middle of this movie. As the adventure like gets going, and they do like a fun enough job of like setting it up that like they establish him enough of a like, do you really want to do that to yourself? Like you think he's going to be like, a bad abusive ex or something like that. And it's like the fun subversion of like, no, he's like completely supportive and just wants the best for you. And that's, that can hurt even worse sometimes.
Well, and a great thing about it also was that, was when, he said, she goes, so she good to you? He goes, I mean, she makes it like she has an honest living. Like, and it's very clear that the thing that broke them up was that she was a thief. And he's like, it's like, I couldn't, their whole dynamic is like, it's really believable that this is a real reason why divorces happen. This is a reason why couples break up, even though they care about each other deeply. People make decisions, and it's great in bringing some reality to it, but also like that's perfectly counterbalanced by this big barbarian woman being in love with this like little halfling guy, and it's perfect. I will also shout out, I think the best thing that this film does in a big way is setting up a super familiar trope that is found in almost every D&D campaign, which is the idea of a found family. Realizing that like bringing back the mom, his wife, isn't what like, he even mentions it, he goes, if you had only known her. And it's like, yeah, but she doesn't. And in that moment, he realizes to do what's best for her and what's best for their quote unquote found family, it's to do that. And it's like, it's just amazing. It's just such an like brilliantly done, telling the friendship and the platonic love that these two have for each other over the film, showing how much they care about each other. And I think it's great that they do play it into it a little bit about like, what? No, we're not together. And then he goes, well, why wouldn't you be into me? And she goes, oh, your lips are too small, or whatever she says to it. Yeah. And he goes, like, what? Nobody's ever complained about my lips, but people like, it's just, lips, right? It's perfectly set up to be like, yes, they are aware that most people consider them in a relationship, but they are, and he sets up, he's like, we quickly established a brother-sister like relationship. When he's telling his story to the to the appeal boards. Oh my gosh, and the fact that he got his appeal for
We granted your pardon. Yeah.
yeah.
After like writing Chancellor Jonathan out. That's another thing. Like, I love the stupidity of the names for a lot of these characters. And then you have like the one that's like normal. It's Simon. There is a Simon in there. Or even Forge is like kind of a normal name. I do want to shout out Holga. Among her languages is Common and Halfling. So it is a, like, she is one of the few people in this that speaks a second language, and that is of Halfling. I love that opening sequence too of it's setting up the backstory of Chris Pine's character, and like, you know, the setting up his, like, you know, he was a good guy that turned bad kind of thing, and you know, fell on hard times. I think like one of the things in the trailer that they used to kind of set it up is basically this idea of like, we stole a bad thing and for the wrong person. Obviously, like they summarize that in the trailer, but like we get the sense of that in this, and he doesn't even know while he's in prison that like Forge is the bad guy. But it's still like a fun like way to tell their backstory, and even the real introduction, and I'll shout it out as like another little Easter eggy thing. The Revel's End is like the prison they're in, which is a, you know, well-known prison in that setting kind of thing. So even like tying that as its own Easter egg, but the whole opening sequence does a great job of setting up both characters. It sets up him as like this great storyteller who, you know, has come up with this plan, and the constant, like, I really think Jonathan would appreciate this backstory, kind of the little breaking the fourth wallness there. But even the opening of this big, bulky, you know, half ogre or whatever kind of character coming in, half orc probably, coming in and being like this imposing threat, and like Michelle Rodriguez just immediately snapping his legs and like knocking him out, immediately sets up what you need to know about her character as well, and the fun relationship that these two have together. That gets established both through like what we see them do and the story that Chris Pine's character is telling is just a lot of fun. And then I love the selling point of, clearly they were always planning a jailbreak, but his story is so moving. He rolls, like, again, going to like the like meta-ness of it. He rolls a nat 20 on persuasion, and they grant the pardon, but he continues to go with the plan of fleeing on this Birdman's wings.
It's too late by that point. They the Jonathan walks in, and it's like, okay, we immediately grab him and like go out the window with him.
Yeah.
And it's like, by the way, you rolled high enough, you got your pardon. Yeah. It's like, you don't hear it, but like he says you got your pardon.
Yeah, and the perfect callback to that at the end where Forge tries to do the exact same thing, but they've learned, wall, right? And there's a big wall there now, so he just kind of like thuds against it. I love that as well. So yeah, like even just fun little character moments like that are a delight. And I love the way that Forge, Hugh Grant, in his villainy, as you kind of touched on, Logan, like, he is a charming villain, and he's, you know, he's spinning things to Chris Pine's daughter in a way that like makes sense, and he tells the exact right lies to convince her, since Chris Pine was keeping things too close to the chest for her protection. I love that Hugh Grant's character like exposes that and manages to avoid that. Exploit that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Little behind, like, workings in my head when that scene shows up, I'm like, there was 100% a DM asked, how much did you tell your daughter about your plan to bring back your dead wife? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I told her just this. And he goes, okay, thank you. Right. Probably wrote down a note and was like, moving on. Like, it's such a great, like, once again, it pulls so well that you think, okay, this is, as somebody who's a not that long time of a player, but a long enough time of a player who's I've also DM'd. And so like, I know these quote unquote tricks that DMs use to exploit the decisions that you think you're making that are good, but in reality are completely playing into, I'm going to turn this on you later. And you're going to have to deal with the ramifications of your choices. It's so good.
Another just a really fun like meta sequence that we get that is like tying into a real spell and stuff like that is the the diversion that they create, that is like Chris Pine coming in and singing on the lute, that all the guards come by, and then it like starts flickering and sputtering and just turns into this like horrific like monster version of Chris Pine, is the casting of Major Image that just also goes awry because Simon's not always great with magic.
Well, Simon's in particular rolled a nat 1 on his dex check, and his foot got stuck in the ground. You're like, why was that happening? Well, how did he not see that coming? He rolled a nat 1. That's why it happened. He did a pretty good job of keeping his concentration checks up, but eventually he started failing.
Yeah. Going back to the sequence in the Underdark where they're getting the helmet. Logan, what did you think of the dragon encounter in this Dungeons and Dragons film?
Again, like, I think, you both have touched on it, but the way that this movie sort of subverts so many fun fantasy tropes, right? Like, it's just a very clever, self-referential movie, right? Like, that feels like the kind of silly thing that would get concocted for a D&D campaign. And it also feels like a fun little kind of like, poke at like the granddaddy of like fantasy genre, right? With like Lord of the Rings and like the dragons you imagine there, right? And instead to get this like giant fat like cat of a dragon sliding out of a tunnel chasing after its food is so great and so silly. And
we even like the movie even sets up another dragon earlier. Like we see the dragon in the flashback of the the war that like killed all of those soldiers and stuff. We see this black tar dragon shooting like acid and goo.
It's the Black Dragon Rokar. It is a named character within campaigns of this world, and so is the dragon that shows up. I think it's
Themberchaud.
Themberchaud. Yeah. So. Yeah. All like both dragons named actual things that you can use in campaigns that have stat blocks and everything. It's awesome. Themberchaud, especially because for I highly doubt you know this, Logan, but when a dragon needs to use its breath weapon to shoot fire, acid, whatever it happens to be, it has to roll a charge die. So basically, the DM or the player, whoever's using breath weapon, has to roll a d6, and depending on how high you roll, you're able to use that breath weapon again.
Yeah, it's basically like you use it, and then it's like depleted, and each turn you roll a d6, and you have to roll like a 5 or 6 to get it back, so you can use it again.
Right away, otherwise you have to wait a turn. So every time you saw it spark, it was the DM rolling too low on the charge die. And that's once again awesome, but also it shows an ingeniousness of the players to be like, okay, wait, he's failing. How is he failing it? And it goes, oh, it's like sparking, but it's not catching a light. It's like, but he's breathing out something first. It's like, yes. Okay. They use that to do the compression, the gas compression ignition methodology to escape from the Underdark. That entire sequence is set up probably because, or not, I shouldn't say probably. It's written so it's not set up that way. But in my mind, in the mind of like the person seeing behind, like seeing the puppeteering going on, of this D&D campaign, I saw that as just like hey, I have an idea. Let's see if this works. Otherwise, we're screwed because we're trapped in here anyway. We might as well try to make this work. Also, right. I don't believe prestidigitation causes actual heat from a flame, so I don't know how that would have ignited.
So I'm looking it up specifically right now because we talked about this. Like, was it conjure flame or is it prestidigitation? Again, dumb nerd shit that we were talking about on our drive home. Because I thought it was prestidigitation. Because he also like earlier in that first scene he uses that
fresh cut grass.
He has the fresh cut grass, which is a allusion to a Critical Role character in their current campaign. But yeah, prestidigitation is like, oh, you can create a smell, and one of the things you can do, you can instantly light or snuff out a candle, a torch, or a small campfire. So he is lighting a small candle. Basically, you can produce a small flame.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
So there you go. But yeah, even that like just silly, like attention to detail in this world that they're setting up, and the world that like the diehard fans for this movie will love and appreciate. But it also. They did enough of a job to set it up that he can, produce a little flame from his finger. So even if you don't know prestidigitation, you saw him do that, and you can, you can expound upon that that when Chris Pine's like, hey, do that thing you did, that's exactly where they're going with it. So yeah, it's a fun little like callback as we get throughout this. So much of the spells that we see in the final battle between Serena and everybody else, or not Serena. Serena was the mermaid from the Safina, is the wizard here, are real spells and stuff like that. So yeah, a ton of fun there in terms of like you can see magic missile being shot off, and we talked the big hand versus hand battle appears to be Bigby's hand, which is a spell that you can cast where you get a giant hand that you can use to either push things, throw people, or just like punch people kind of thing. And so fun little magic versus magic in a way. Like so much of I think the fun of this that is now just like even like sparking is they have a creative use of magic in this versus like so much of one of the big complaints of the Harry Potter series, especially in how it was filmed, at least, is that it just became like wands became guns. And a wand duel is just like, all right, I'm shooting a laser at you, you're shooting a laser at me, and those lasers are meeting in the middle. Or you are just like casting something that knock somebody back or whatever. And so here we got to see like just the fun different ways that they could like turn these spells on one another or use the spells in a lot of clever fun ways. So yeah, it was just like so much fun in this movie is very much what it felt like. It's such a great time. Any other elements or things anyone wants to shout out? I get like we also have like the fun little sequence in the labyrinth itself of the games that they've like brought back, which is rife with Easter eggs, including an Easter egg to the old like Dungeons and Dragons animated series. So there's some fun there. Obviously, a lot of the creatures that you see in that sequence are classic Dungeons and Dragons characters. Logan, any other things you want to give a shout out to or give some love to?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked in it, but I think that whole final Indian sequence fight, right? Of like their a little Avengers moment of each one kind of like punching her as she's getting kind of smacked around, right? Ending with, Dungeons and Dragons Hulk moment of just her smashing the fucking shit out of that wizard. And I did also like Chris Pine is so good in this movie. I did love Chris Pine's like, I think you got her, and then just her just smashing her more and more and more, and then just like throwing her into a wall. Like it was so good. Like, yeah, it's such a great, I think, like kind of stinger into that whole entire like epic sequence on.
In particular, the end of that sequence of the owlbear like throwing her, smashing her against the wall, her body like falling, clearly dead already, and then the wall falling on top of her got probably one of the biggest laughs I've had, like the biggest guffaw I've had in quite a while, because I was not expecting them to go that far with killing her.
Yeah, it was so good, and like that whole sequence is like orchestrated together really well. I think Simon's arc is, probably the second strongest in the film, right alongside Chris Pine's character. And so I think to see him have that moment of like standing toe to toe with this like super powerful, evil, badass wizard, which I guess technically, well, it doesn't matter, but was like an awesome moment. And like, I like the fact that even though he sort of like has his confidence again, she still is more powerful. And like he can't beat her alone. It is like, it takes the entire team to kind of defeat her, and an owlbear. And like, I like that they sort of win by trickery, right? Like by bringing back the daughter, by slapping on the magic thing for her, by like having, again, Chekhov's gun, like having that payoff of like, hey, like here's an invisibility cloak, basically. You're going to have this. We're going to reference it multiple times in the movie. It's probably going to be used at some point. And that's like, even I had sort of forgotten about that. And then, it comes back and it's great. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this movie is such a, like, smartly written film in terms of, like, planting so many seeds that, like, come home to roost, right? And, like, then get into that moment of, obviously Michelle Rodriguez's character is stabbed, she dies. And, like, I actually think back to the moment when they're talking to the paladin for the first time, and he sort of brings up like, I want to bring my dead wife back. And he sort of says, like, you know, there are many lives. Just because, you know, she's not in this one anymore doesn't mean it's necessarily good to take her out of hers. And like, it's so like the first moment of like, oh, okay, like self-reflection from Chris Pine and me as a film goer for 30 years, like, oh, they're probably not going to bring their wife back, or at least not successful, or at least not like permanently kind of thing. And then we kind of kept going on, and I began to be like, oh, one character might die in this part, and that might be like the choices to make kind of thing. And like, it sort of became a guessing game of like, who is it going to be kind of thing, and seeing it be Michelle Rodriguez and having that moment happen. And then they cut to a flashback that shows stuff that we haven't seen yet, as well as like scenes we have seen, like mixed together and tracing this whole arc. Because, you know, Chris Pine goes through, you know, his like, here's my 3-minute life story up until this point. But just getting like a whole like 60-second flashback at the end of like all of his arc with Michelle Rodriguez and them raising this daughter. And this daughter is like 13 years old. They've spent, you know, a dozen years together with this child. And like she, in, you know, very real, tangible, not insignificant ways, is the mother to this girl, right? And the only mother she's ever known. And so I thought it was such a powerful way to then be like, this is sort of an easy choice, right? Of who we're going to save with this chalice. And so I loved it. I think it is a very like, oh shit, like very sad, tearful, beautiful moment. It worked really well on me. And yeah, I thought it was a very like emotionally resonant ending as well. And again, it goes back into how I've said, like, I think this movie handles the sort of mature emotional sides of the story really well as well. Which can be tricky for these kind of movies.
Yeah, even like the character reactions to that moment of like Michelle coming back and being like, you wasted it on me, like is true to her character and what we've seen of their relationship and stuff like that. And how much she knows that like his whole reason for doing that was to get it so he could bring his wife back. So like the fact that like he's had this change of heart
on her, right?
It is a
great,
because I love that the movie isn't about building a romantic relationship about them. It and you know sets it off from the beginning of like this is not what they're about. But they do have a paternal relationship to Kira, the little girl, in a way that we, you know, the fact that like Michelle Rodriguez is constantly calling her Bug is such like a lovely like little just, you know, like pet name kind of and just relationship. And then also like even talking about that now, I'm like there's also this the obviously ongoing imagery of that dragonfly that, you know, if you want to read into what the paladin said of like there are other planes, other, you know, other forms of existence, maybe she is, you know, after she died, she went into a different plane and has come back as a dragonfly creature or something like that. And that's because we see dragonflies regularly around Chris Pine. There's that like great sequence of like him not like him freaking out about the dragonfly in the same way that like we've had a couple mosquitoes around here, and both Cameron and I'll have like, you know, we'll see it flutter and we'll just like immediately freak out, even though it's a itty bitty thing that we could easily squish.
I think it's also like very much like a signage. Like it's like, hey, this has been a sign for a while for you to have let go. And I think it's great. Interesting enough, the same thing with the Michelle Rodriguez with the kind of like 60 seconds of this relationship with half of it we haven't seen before. Yeah. The reveal that he stole gold during their capture of the Red Wizard is such a brilliant piece because they allude to him being greedy because he looks at the gold as they pass it. They don't allude to him taking it until it's finally revealed. And it's such a great revelation. I loved it.
Yeah, the like I didn't know they marked their gold, so I led them direct. Like we get the idea that like, oh, they were at odds, so they killed his wife at the beginning of the movie, but like getting that extra layer of like, no, it was directly because of his actions. That's how they were able to find it to kill his wife.
To his greed specifically. And then on top of that, it was also that he stole the gold, and then like it's fascinating. So it's like you think, like you said, you think it's because he's a harper, they did this as like retaliation. But one of my favorite things he says is, he goes, and I wasn't even unlucky enough to have been there.
Yeah.
Just so good.
In his like, I'm the king of failures, as he's trying, like he's giving the, you know, inspirational speech that's going to give them all some temp hit points or whatever.
10 hit points, Bardic inspirations, you know?
Yeah.
It's such a great moment where everybody's so down on themselves and he's the only one that believes in them. And they're like, well, you know, and he goes, I am the biggest failure here. Like that, I believe in you because I know that you can do it because I'm the failure. And it's such a great poignant moment of this character arc that we've seen of like, well, why, like, it's not even like, oh, I'm a planner. Like, I plan things. I make a plan, and then if that plan falls through, I have another plan. I come up with other plans. It's not less so that he has plans, more than he has people he has faith in. And he inspires them by getting them to believe in themselves. And it's so incredible. Also, shout out to the nickname Bug, because that's one of my niece's nickname that we all call her. We all call her Bug. And so when you call her Bug, it's like, my heart, like, hit me right away. Like, yeah, it's awesome. It's so great.
Any final thoughts anybody wants to share before we go ahead and wrap up here?
I think it's great. I really do, you know, think it pretty firmly punched its spot into, you know, my top 10 films of the year. And like, it is a movie that I just want to watch again, right? And I just watched it. Like, I think it's one of those movies that, like, do just want to, like, sit on a couch and just kick my feet back and just relax for 2 hours and have a great time, right? And just laugh a lot, smile pretty continuously, shed a tear or two, and just, have some great action moments. Like, it is a great movie, right? And, like, kind of the, like, popcorny sense of that phrase. And so I had a damn blast. So
anything from you, Cam?
Go watch this movie. If you listen to this entire podcast and you're like, I don't know, just go watch the movie. It's so fantastic. If you've already seen it, go see it again. This is a film that I think is just going to be better on rewatching time and time again. That's what I'm
excited for too.
Yeah, because there's so many things in it that I'm just like, this is so just well done, well structured, well played out. It executes on every level. It knows what kind of movie it is. It's not trying to be a movie that it isn't. And everybody is on board and on the same page. It's great directing. It's great cinematography, and some shots are like fucking incredible. And overall, just an amazing time. Go watch this movie.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is I think one of the like minor weaknesses of the movie is that apart from like Forge, like Safina is kind of like she's a big bad. We're introduced that she's a big bad. If you know the setting, you know that the Red Wizards are a big bad kind of thing. And then like the cloud of death that she's like trying to cast and like her end goal is just kind of, it is a little like by the numbers, but at the same point, like sometimes these movies don't need to have like a big bad when they are about like the fun like crew coming together to take out the enemy. I think a potential second movie could have as much fun in finding a way to make, like, now that the party is established, like, okay, now give them a real villain that can match them toe for toe in all aspects, and not just like they're more powerful and so you all need to come together with the power of friendship or whatever. So that's like, I think that's the one little like I would have liked if it had been better if like that character had been a little bit more drawn out and stuff like that. But all told, it's still just a fun time. And I think you have Forge to be like the personal relationship for the big bad here. Even if he was, maybe unwitting. I don't think he was actually unwitting. I think he knew what he signed up for from the beginning. That's why he's obviously trying to like flee the city before everything goes down. But yeah, it's a ton of fun, and such a joyous, just good couple of hours to go and have a fun little action fantasy adventure. So yeah, shout out to Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. All right, that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for joining me to talk about it. I'm glad you were able to catch this opening weekend, because I think we left the movie the other night, and Cam and I were probably just planning on doing this as like the episode anyway. So I appreciate that we had your perspective as well, Logan. I'm glad you were able to get to see it.
It makes me, yeah, I mean, it definitely makes me excited to look at like, you know, Critical Role stuff or Dimension 20 stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's so much fun.
I will say if you are interested, Dimension 20 is probably certainly the easier one to get into, just because all of their seasons
like
are
140 episodes.
Yeah, their seasons are all short form stuff. And the one that hooked me was Fantasy High. It was the first one they did, which is entirely available on their YouTube channel. You can watch the whole thing, and it was like in that first season they do basically like a role-playing episode and then a combat episode and then a role-play episode. And by the end of the first combat episode, so 2 episodes in, I was like hooked and like, I can't wait to see where this story goes. So I would say give that a shot if you are interested. And then if you do get hooked, easily the best actual play story I've seen of anything is a 6-episode miniseries called EXU Calamity that Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20 created and told in the Critical Role universe. So like it's using like the lore of the Critical Role side of things from Matt Mercer, but it's Brennan doing what Brennan has like done really, really well for a number of years of, I'm going to tell a very short, condensed story. Even that's actually, it's not even 6 episodes, it's 4 episodes. I'm thinking the last episode is like a 6-hour episode, so it's a lot. But like the whole thing is like I still go back and occasionally will like watch the last hour of that thing just to feel something because of how well they craft a story. Largely improvised and largely completely at the whims of dice, dice rolls and stuff like that. So yeah, those are definitely some high point ones I would recommend trying to check out if you are so inclined. But yeah, you can follow all of us. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, take a peek over at the Let's Play series that we're doing over at that nerdy site, Jafo, Jedi Fallen Order. I'm playing through it for the first time. Have a bunch of episodes that I'm in the middle of editing, and so we'll be getting those rolling out. So look forward to those.
Cool. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I'll give a shout out to that D Plus show. It airs every Friday. We just went through and have now watched the first 4 Pirates. I had to think about where we are. Pirates of the Caribbean movies. We are building into, I thought we just did the 5th one, Times the Flat Circle for me. Oh my God. We're going to watch the 5th and final Pirates of the Caribbean movie this week and discuss that and wrap up that series. That should be a lot of fun. So go check out all of those and our thoughts on the various pirate films.
Indeed. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. I will echo all those shout-outs, including our other Let's Plays that are going on right now. Cameron and I are playing Elden Ring on Tuesdays, and I've been replaying Breath of the Wild on Thursdays in the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom. So go check out something. We got something for you every day here on, every weekday at least, on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. So yeah, go check out all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. Follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, ring notification bells, all that fun stuff. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.